Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Doctor Who ramble. This time we are talking about Season 2, Episode 5, The Story and the Engine by Inua Ellams, who is a new kind of guest writer for the show. They've never written for Doctor Who before. He is like a playwright and a poet, I believe. I think in terms of some of the lines in this episode, you can really tell he was a poet. I think there's a lot of beautiful dialogue in this one. This was, along with Lux, this is probably one of my most anticipated episodes this season when the titles got announced. This was the title that grabbed me the most. I was really intrigued by what it meant. I really enjoyed this one. I think it definitely lived up to my excitement for it, and it lived up to like the intrigue I had over what it was about. And yeah, I think it helped that a couple of days ago they released like a little prequel short story about Omo, who's obviously the Doctor's friend in this episode. Their first meeting, like the story that Omo's telling at the beginning of the episode. They released a short story a couple of days ago that's basically an extended version of that. And at some point in the episode, Omo mentions like a woman with blue earrings that he wants to get back to, like the love of his life or something. We also meet her in that story. We spend a lot of time with her. So it was nice reading that and then jumping into this episode. So I think it felt a bit less jarring that the Doctor's now going to visit this friend that he has. There's a lot of surprises thrown in there. Not all of them good, but we'll talk about that. But for the most part, I just really, really loved what this episode had to say and like the themes of it. And I think the character work was really good. It surprised me in many ways. It pleasantly surprised me in a few ways. And yeah, I guess we'll just dive right in and talk about it. So I really enjoyed just the visuals of people like in the barber shop telling these stories, and then we're like seeing them visualized on the wall. It's like I mentioned at the start with the short story that they released. The images in that short story are the images that they show at the beginning of this episode when he's telling that story. So they obviously used those from the episode and made the short story with them. And I just love the art of that. I thought they looked really nice, and I thought it was a cool kind of visual thing. And at first, I kind of thought it was just like an artistic choice for the episode, but no, we find out later it literally is. That is what this place can do. It does project those images onto the screen like that, which is why it's a bit weird when they put the title sequence in it and kind of do that. That for me did not work. I thought it looked really janky and bad. The way the title sequence starts and then just suddenly it's like, and we just cut to it normally. That felt very weird. I see what they were going for, but I don't think that worked, especially when it isn't an artistic thing with the pictures being on the wall. It's like an actual story thing that actually happens. So to have the title sequence then occupy that space was a bit strange. We arrive with the same old kind of start of an episode shtick with Belinda yelling at the Doctor to take her home. We have the whole what's that device called? The Vindicator, I think it is. Doing all that jazz. And the Doctor realizes they could stop off in Lagos in Nigeria to kind of continue to pinpoint 2025. And yeah, I really like this sense that 15 has had his own adventures, just gone off on his own, because he has this friendship with Omo. He does have this history with other people. He mentions that a lot in this episode. I feel like Inua Ellams has a really nice understanding of the Doctor, or at least specifically like 15, and bizarrely enough is I think the episode that kind of fleshed out 15's history and his character a lot more than other writers have done, which is bizarre considering this is like his first script for the show. Hopefully not the last, we'll see. But yeah, I liked that I kind of filled it out like this incarnation has had more of a life than we've seen. We got glimpses of that already, but the fact that he has just travelled on his own, like before he heard about Belinda and stuff. I'm guessing after the Ruby left, he's had all these adventures on his own and kind of made these connections, which I really did enjoy. It just makes his incarnation feel like more lived in, and the universe just feel a bit, wider. I did think it was strange when he was like, this is, I've never been in this black body before. And I actually wrote down Joe Martin erasure. I guess not, but that still was a bit weird. Anyway, I did enjoy what he was saying, like with this incarnation, being black, being a black man, coming to Nigeria and spending time there and embodying himself in that culture makes him feel like he has a home, which is a really lovely sentiment because he always talks about Earth being like a home to him in a way, and he's very fond of it. To have like a specific place on Earth where he can go and feel at home was really lovely, and I like that sense of community. That felt just very rich and authentic, and I love that Belinda was like, okay, take as much time as you need here. Her rush to get home is kind of lessened a bit because she understands that feeling, what she's talking about, going to India and stuff. So I thought that was a lovely, very human moment for the Doctor. Belinda points out, that's, you say you're not human, but that's the most human thing of all, to want a home, to want that belonging. So that was a really lovely speech, and I totally get it, especially after an episode like Dot and Bubble. You see how he's treated at the end of that by all those dickheads. That was really nice. I loved that kind of sentiment, and there's so many reasons that the Doctor and his companion like stick around when they really should just be flying away again. Something would intrigue them, this mystery they get caught up in, like Lux. But I like that this was a different sort of reason, and a very human reason for the Doctor to stick around, and Belinda's just going to chill in the TARDIS until he's done. And I was very scared that this was just going to be another episode of, Belinda's going to be in the TARDIS for the whole episode and not going to really have much to do. Very glad that I was proven wrong in that about halfway through when she started like stepping out and doing her own thing and then joining the action. That was great. I was a bit nervous, especially because we had one scene of Belinda last week. I was scared she was just going to be relegated to the TARDIS this week, but that was not the case, which was great. And yeah, I love Belinda so much. I'm loving 15 and Belinda's vibe. Is this the hottest TARDIS team we've ever had? I think it might just be. I was kind of kicking my legs and giggling at both of them this episode. The Doctor arrives at the Barbers and reunites with Omo and some of the other like side characters in this episode who I thought were all, I felt like they all got a decent kind of moment to shine and like, explain some of their backstory, explain who they were missing. But I liked the setup of him kind of spotting them all on these missing posters, then walking into this Barbers and they're all there. That was really cool. And just the mystery of what the hell is going on in this place. Like you just feel unnerved straight away. So I really liked that. And we're hearing these stories be told. People's hair's instantly growing back. And I'm like, this is wild. What's going on here? It's great if you get a haircut you don't like because it will just instantly grow back and you can have another go. It's like Animal Crossing. But yeah, I liked just having that room to breathe, get to know some of these side characters, and just wonder what on earth is happening. And again, a very human moment that is written for the Doctor in this episode. I like that, when he volunteers to share his story, he's like, I'm going to share the story of an ordinary life. That's what appeals to him the most. That's like the richest story for the Doctor, because that's, in a way, an adventure he can never have, but also he did have that as 14. So, maybe the appeal is kind of not as rich as it used to be, but I like that sentiment that he sits down and tells a story that Belinda must have told him about one of her shifts or something maybe he observed when he was like stalking her in the Robot Revolution. I liked that, kind of the most powerful story that he could think of to tell, and the story he wants to actively tell is Belinda's story of this shift and kind of, seeing what was wrong with this patient and ultimately saving her life. I thought that was really lovely. I loved seeing that because, again, at this point, Belinda's still just in the TARDIS, and I was like, oh no, she's not going to get anything to do in this episode. And then when they started doing this, it's like, oh, this is a good way of still giving her screen time, even if she's not part of the main action. So seeing a bit more of her life as a nurse was really lovely. Very emotional, very nice sequence of, the woman coming back and thanking her a bit later on, giving her flowers and stuff. And the fact that Belinda had sacrificed spending time with her family to, look after this patient, because it had just been kind of this patient now just been dumped on her. That was really lovely. I was kind of hoping they'd explain why, when we were visualizing it, we just saw like actual, just real life footage rather than like the drawings and stuff we'd gotten with the other stories. That felt a bit of a disconnect. I feel like it should have all just been the same sort of thing. The same style, or just all would have been actual footage. But it's fine, it is what it is. And then we kind of see the betrayal Omo's betrayal. And he was waiting for the Doctor to turn up at this place because he knew the Doctor had like this endless wealth of stories, which ultimately does save the day in the end. Um, and he would appease this engine that seemingly feeds and runs on stories to get to wherever on Earth is going. And we quickly get established that this barber is very mysterious. This woman who's with him, Abina, who kind of comes and brings people food every day. They can both come and go from this place as they please, but the men in there can't, who've kind of just come in for haircuts. We're quickly establishing something very strange is going on here. The Doctor kind of realizes, like, oh dear, maybe this isn't necessarily the community and sense of home and a safe space that I thought it was, because now Omo's kind of, selling out my stories to try and get, save himself and save all the others, because the Doctor could be an endless supply for this engine, and it's a way of them all going. So that's why they were more excited to see him finally show up. So that was kind of a sad moment where the Doctor confronts Omo about that and says, I thought I had a home here, and you've kind of betrayed that idea. That was really sad, but also, again, very, I think, believable, sadly, that people would do that to someone like the Doctor. They would kind of throw them under the bus to save themselves and save some others. In a way, I think it would have hit harder if we had met Omo before. If this was like, kind of like in Closing Time, we revisit Craig, who we met in the previous season of The Lodger. I kind of wish we had an adventure with a character before, and then this story happened with them, because I think that betrayal would have really been like, oh. But the fact that we've only met Omo for the first time in this episode, I think it would have been nice if there's an opportunity for this to hit a bit harder. But it still was very well done. I thought Ncuti was brilliant in that sequence, and it's quickly established that this barber shop is in Lagos, but also in outer space, traveling somewhere. And that's why they're feeding the engine the story. And we learn all about the barber and stuff like that, and his kind of backstory and his vengeful plot against the gods. And I liked the reveal of like exactly what they were, where they were, and what was going on. When the Doctor kind of tells his story and takes an opportunity to break open the front door and kind of smash his way out, and then we see like they're traveling on this big robot spider, this mechanical spider thing, walking through this big web. That was a really nice visual of like traveling through space, like making it like a web. And I liked what the barber was saying about. I don't know if it necessarily makes sense in regards to like it's sort of like you're traveling through time and it could be anywhere and everywhere, like all worlds. But when he was kind of saying, I used to call it the World Wide Web, and then the humans named that after something much worse. That's a great sentiment, because the internet is a garbage fire. It is an awful place to be. But I'm also like, World Wide Web? I feel like this isn't about multiple worlds. I feel like that's a strange name for it. But, I appreciated the commentary nonetheless. But yeah, I loved the big kind of wide reveal shot. All those men in there just hanging on for their dear lives, and then we just get this big wide reveal of like the web that they're traveling through. And the spider running along them, this robotic spider engine thing, which I thought, I hate spiders. I hate them. I don't have arachnophobia. I'm not, it's not to that extent. Um, Little spiders and stuff I can just pick up and take outside. I can deal with that. It's when they get like absurdly big, I'm like, no, shenanigans, no. But I thought this was a beautiful design. I thought it looked amazing, and that's why I'm so sad we barely saw it. I feel like they really underutilized that design. It's sad that we couldn't kind of see a bit more of it. I know it's hard when you're inside it, and that's where the action's taking place. When I saw it in trailers and stuff, I kind of assumed it was going to be like a separate entity, or this was like the creature they were, feeding something or someone to, but it was like separate from where they were. But obviously, because the barbershop is actually just on the back of this spider thing, and it is what they're feeding, it's harder to show off, I guess. So yeah, it's kind of a shame, but I think it was a beautiful design. I love the visuals of like this spider thing crawling along the webs, and learning about the barber's backstory. And he used to be human, then he was kind of felt betrayed by all these gods, and now he's on a mission to find them and undo them, erase them, kill them in any way, shape, or form. Um, I think very much like the Hogfather in a way in that book, where you know, a way of killing Hogfather is to make people stop believing in him, rather than actually like stabbing him or anything like that to physically kill him. You can kill him as an idea by making people stop believing him. It felt like that kind of vein of, um, you know, that's a way of assassinating these gods. And I thought it was a breath of fresh air. At first, I was very scared they were going to reveal the Barber was one of the Pantheon. I was like, oh, we're doing this again. Like, I feel like maybe say if you're going to do this again, save it for Mrs. Flood now and don't do it again. But I liked that this was a story about gods without a god in a way. I know Abina, I think, is a god, but it's not like this was another like okay, it's one of the Pantheon. Let's get rid of them. So I like that it still had something to say about gods and religion and all these different cultures and stuff, but we weren't physically fighting like one of the Pantheon or anything like that. So still very in keeping thematically with what this era is trying to do with like gods and fantasy creatures and stuff like that. But still doing something different with it to make it stand out, which I appreciated. Shenanigans are happening, so the TARDIS is kind of reacting badly to it, which causes Belinda to get the hell out of there and go on an investigative kind of journey trying to find the Doctor. Leads her down a similar path. She causes a bit of chaos in the market, and I love the. I didn't realise until I saw the credits, but the market seller who she talks to is Inua Ellams, the writer. So I love that he had a little cameo in his own story. That was really nice. So that was a nice moment. And I forgot to mention as well, Mrs. Flood obviously had her cameo. Glad it wasn't just at the end of the episode again. It was just during the Belinda flashback sequence. She was just kind of there. When she popped up, I kind of went, oh. I was like, I'm really into this world and these characters. Why is she here? It felt very weird that she was there. I don't know why, but I'm just like, ugh, I don't care. Because I'm really enjoying this season, and I think we're kind of heading into the bit that I'm now the most nervous about, starting from next week onwards, and then the finale. So I didn't need the reminder. I was like, go away, Mrs. Flood. And Belinda also, this is another thing that worries me. Belinda saw a little girl, and she mentions it at the end, like, did you see this strange girl? And the doctors talk about, things the stories bleeding out, stuff like that. It's probably just something like that. I thought it was left open to interpretation. No, if you see the credits, and some people may have just recognised the girl. I didn't, but because she was quite far away. That girl is Poppy from Space Babies, and she's credited as Poppy from Space Babies. So, what the fuck? What does that mean? Where's that going? I don't know any rumours myself about that, but apparently there are rumours out there, and Anita Dobson, who plays Mrs. Flood, has spoken about there is a link to Space Babies and stuff. So to keep watching and look out for that. So it's not just like they didn't know who, they got this little girl back and didn't know what to credit her as, so just called her Poppy again. I think it is supposed to be Poppy. So something is going on with all this. I don't know if there's some Clara time stream shenanigans happening again, but with a different character. I don't know if that's the whole Mundy Finn connection with Belinda. Maybe she's also Poppy somehow, and we're doing a Clara thing again. And I was just like, why are you reminding me of the worst episode of Doctor Who? I was like, it's going so well. I'm really enjoying this. Why would you do that? So the fact that I'm going to have to hear about those fucking Space Babies again is not getting me particularly hyped for the finale, which I'm sure is when they're going to maybe address this. So I don't know what that means. I don't know where that's going. I have zero theories regarding it. I'm not sure I entirely care because Space Babies. So that gets me a bit nervous. We'll have to wait and see. Speaking of cameos, we kind of, Abina up to this point has been very, mysterious, and we don't really know her connection to the Barber, why she involved in this. And then we learn, she has a past with the Doctor of her own. And, she feels let down and feel like the Doctor failed to save her from an awful situation she was in before. So now she's kind of more than happy to use the Doctor for her own gains. Not that she knows the Barber's true intentions with the gods. but she is a god herself. Um, and the Doctor that she knew, as we see, was Jo Martin's Doctor, the fugitive Doctor. I had heard rumours that Jo Martin was going to be showing up, and if any episode she was going to be showing up in, she was in this one. Um, so it wasn't like a completely out of the blue surprise for me that she showed up. Um, but it still didn't occur to me until she was there. I'm like, oh shit, wow. Um, so I love that we got her back. It's still such a shame that we just keep getting like little snippets of her and not like full blown comebacks. But it was nice to reference it, especially because early in the episode I felt like they kind of were erasing her a bit because they didn't mention like there has been a Black Doctor before, you know. Ncuti's not the first Black Doctor. Um, but I think you could say, the Doctor doesn't remember being the fugitive Doctor, because he didn't get the memories back. We threw the fob watch thing down the TARDIS, never to be seen again, I expect. So maybe that's why he's kind of treating it like, this is the first time in this body. Maybe he means like specifically this black male body. It's like, okay, but then we get that cameo of Jo Martin, and I'm like, how do you remember that? You're supposed to have forgotten that time. So I'm not sure it makes sense to see Jo Martin and to have them just remember that. But I did like seeing her, and I think using her as like a previous Doctor that Abina met really helps to show just how old Abina is and how old the Barber is and how long they've been doing this for, how long the Barber's hatred for these gods has been allowed to simmer. And it really makes it a lot more, their motives, you just really understand them a lot more. So, that was nice and kind of just not diminishing the timeless child stuff that happened in the Chibnall era. I'm like that they still kind of lean into that and don't just disregard it entirely. I think that's really nice. I think it's great for Jo Martin as well, for her to get this little moment to come back. Um, you know, it's a shame it was so brief, and her appearances after Fugitive of the Dune have always just been like cameos, which has been kind of a shame. But it was still fun to see her pop up. By this point, Belinda's popping in as well, and she kind of gets trapped in the Barbers with everyone. Abina's explaining this connection. Um, I will admit, it was around this point I started looking at the clock to see how long was left. I did kind of feel the length of this episode, which I haven't felt with any this season. I don't think it's because the episode wasn't enjoyable, because I really did enjoy this one, but there was a lot of saying and not showing. And I get that when it's an episode about stories and the worth of stories. But this episode itself is a story. You can show things as part of that story. But I do think there was a bit too much telling, not showing in this one. When people are talking about their backstories and stuff, it would have been great. Like, you got Jo Martin back. Can't we see this instead of just having Jo Martin say this happened? Bye. Um, you know, Maybe Jo just wasn't available, and there were plans to do that. But even when we've seen other people, the characters in this episode, kind of talk about their backstories, I do wish we'd got a bit more visually and seen a bit more of it rather than just everything got explained in words rather than showing us properly. And I think that did mean the pacing ground to a halt at times. It was just a very talky episode, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Because I think it was well written, talky stuff. It's not like this was absolute trash dialogue that I hated, but I do feel like pacing wise it needed something, or we needed to see something rather than just be told about it. Abina, she's kind of realizing what the Barber is actually after. He wants these vengeance against these gods, which was not what she thought was their plan. And this is the moment which kind of offers to tell her own story to keep the engine going. And this was probably my favourite bit of the episode, when she's offers to do the Doctor's hair and tell the story while she's doing it. And she tells the story about how these slaves kind of escaped their situation that she was with, by braiding their hair and doing their hair in map patterns so they could find their way out. Beautiful story, brilliant idea. And the fact that she was doing that to the Doctor's hair, and she's showing him how to get out and how to get to the core engine, the heart of the engine, to stop the Barber. I thought that was honestly genius. I loved that idea, and this is why we need fresh blood and fresh writers in Doctor Who. I think that is the crowning example of why this series is so much better than last series, um, because we've got so many new voices. You know, obviously, I Lux was the last one that was just written by Russell, and he co-wrote The Well, but the last couple of episodes, have been just new writers. Um, and it's just so nice having fresh stories, and it means that there's no smug writing for me to get annoyed at if we're getting new writers for most of the episodes. Um, so I really enjoyed that kind of story with the map in the hair, and the Doctor and Belinda then seize their chance and escape, with Abina's aid through that. So that was brilliant. They kind of then make their way through the engine, find the heart of it. I love the visuals of like it's a brain that then opens up. Kind of looks like a mushroom when it opens up, and then you see like the heart of this engine. Because we did get the backstory of this technology. This is kind of the only technology the Barber kind of still had with him, and it kind of grew and expanded, and that's why this kind of little like weaving he had at the start has become this whole web for the spider to kind of run along. And it all comes down to like this heart of this engine. And yeah, the Doctor kind of connects himself to it. So when the Barber kind of confronts him, the Doctor can overload it. It felt very Rings of Akaten, the Doctor using his history and his stories to overload the villain. And it kind of explodes. It felt very much like that, or like Death of the Doctor in the Serial Adventures, where the Doctor and Jo just use all their memories to overload the machine and it explodes. So it's not a new solution. The fact that the Doctor is this ageless being with all these unlimited stories, that literally was the point of the Rings of Akaten. Clara's Leaf is like a story that never ends, or days that should have been that never were. Like the concept of unlimited stories is what destroyed that planet in Rings of Akaten, and that's exactly the same solution here, but just with the Doctor. Like the Doctor's stories were enough this time when it wasn't quite enough in Rings of Akaten. So it's not a brand new bold concept, but I do like the idea of it. Even in the Timeless Children, the Doctor uses all her memories, and it gives the machine thing she was stuck in everything to kind of escape. But it's a good concept, and I think it's always done quite well. And this was another example of it being done really well. I like seeing glimpses of all the Doctors. I mean, we do get that a lot nowadays, because like even Rogue, we saw that. So it's not like it's been ages since we've done like this sort of shtick, but it is still always kind of fun to see. So that was nice seeing, glimpses of the Doctors. Just getting that glimpse of Capaldi just made me realise how much I miss Capaldi. Like how much I loved his Doctor. I need to rewatch his era. Yeah, the Barber's revenge plot against these gods is kind of thwarted at this point. And I like the concept of like the Doctor going and learning this like 6-second story from, I can't remember which writer that he mentions. And then he wrote his own like, I'm born, I die, I'm born. That's such a great just summarization of the Doctor. The trouble is whenever they talk about 6 words, I'm just like, don't you think she looks tired? I just think about it all the time. And for a second I was like, is he just going to say, don't you think she looks tired? And the Doctor kind of convinces the Barber, to let this vengeance go. If you're, by keeping these men here that you've kept, you're preventing their stories from going on, and you're ending their stories prematurely. And that kind of goes what you're, that's what you're against. And that was great. I thought that was a great way of allowing the Barber to kind of see the error of his ways, and come up with his own 6-second story. I like and don't like that we didn't find out what his 6-second story would be that he came up with. I think it would have been. I kind of expected to hear it, and was kind of sad that we didn't. But in a way, I like that we didn't, because in a way that feels like tying things up with a bow. And this is very much about the concept of stories going on and on and on, and not necessarily having an end. So I kind of like that we didn't find out what his 6-word story was. Did I say 6-second story at some point? I hope not. We'll find out when I watch it back. everyone at this point has already gotten out, and then the Doctor and the Barber kind of get through at the last minute. I love the image of like the spider like trying to like climb through as everything's exploding, and then it just goes kaboom. Again, I can't believe I felt sad for like a spider-shaped machine, but I did. Really nice design, and then it's destroyed. Um, so yeah, that was really cool. I liked all of that. I don't know how I feel about the idea of the Doctor and in this one's kind of like we have to save the gods from the Barber. We have to save them. And then I'm like, whenever you meet one of the Pantheon, you're like, anyway, I started blasting. So I feel like there's a bit of clashing of ideas there. I feel like there's not even a mention of like the Doctor has killed gods before, and now he's saving them. I'm like, which way should we be feeling? Like, um, you know, are all the Pantheon evil, or are they not? Are all gods evil, or are they not? I kind of wish there was a bit more of an explanation with that. Maybe that's something for the finale to maybe explore. I don't know. But I do feel like those ideals kind of really clashed, and it was a bit jarring to me. Abina kind of realizes she has like some real freedom now, and she can do whatever she wants. I liked her little conversation with Belinda. Kind of what this ageless god has learned something from a mortal like Belinda. That was a really nice moment. Um, and Oma and the Doctor make amends. Oma kind of seeks forgiveness for his actions and kind of learns the error of his ways. So that was nice. And I did like everyone kind of forgiving the Barber for his actions as well, and just kind of you know letting that go and moving on. Um, and their stories can go on. And they don't need to end yet another story by getting revenge on the Barber for what he did. Um, Omo kind of giving a suggestion of a name for the Barber to kind of use, and a name that people can trust going forward was really nice. And the Doctor and the Barber part on good terms and everything like that. Um, and yeah, away we go. Basically, all is well. So a really beautiful story about stories. My favourite quote in Doctor Who is in The Big Bang, where the Doctor says, we're all stories in the end, just make it a good one. And I feel like this was fundamentally what this episode was about as well. So I really enjoyed that explanation of that kind of idea. And again, just having a story about stories is such a thing for like a poet like Inua to write about. And I think he did a brilliant job with that. I love the visuals that Subset had going for it. I thought the cast were really good. And there's still like a main story just that stands alone, but there may also potentially be glimpses of the future with like the cameo from Poppy from Space Babies. What a sentence! What a weird thing to say. And obviously Mrs. Flood as well. This was a brilliant episode. I really liked it. I do think it got a bit slow at times and got a bit too telly, not showy. Um, but outside of that, I really liked what it was exploring. I thought we got some really great character moments for the Doctor and Belinda in this one. I really liked the exploration of gods and stories, and the price of a story. Um, it was just some really really great, poignant, beautiful stuff explored in this one. And I love the setting in Nigeria as well. I thought, um, you know, I can't speak to the authenticity of like the vibes and stuff that they captured, but I thought there were like beautiful vibes with what they were presenting with us. It did feel homely. It did feel like a sense of community that the Doctor was kind of feeling. Um, so yeah, it's done a great job of expanding 15's lifespan in a way, making this incarnation feel a lot more lived in, a lot more wise and knowledgeable. Um, I'm glad that Belinda wasn't just relegated to the TARDIS and actually did have an active role in things. Um, and yeah, just a really lovely episode. I'd probably give it like 3.5 robot spider engines out of 5. That is going to be everything for my ramble. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. God, this series has been good, isn't it? Oh man, we are at the point where I'm a bit nervous. I've always been nervous at the finale. The last one was not my favourite finale. It kind of did us dirty. So I'm kind of nervous about that again, especially because this series was already being produced alongside Series 1. So it's not like this series necessarily took on board any feedback from Season 1 because it had already been written. So I'm a bit nervous we're going to get another Empire of Death kind of finale. And I don't want this amazing season so far to be undercut with a shit finale again. So I'm a bit nervous about that. Also, next week is the Interstellar Song Contest, and I'm not sure I'm gonna be a fan of this one. I don't think this is gonna be an episode necessarily for me. So I am scared that, you know, I've reached the end of my enjoyment of this series. Obviously, you got to keep an open mind, and you know, I think the finale is going to do some interesting things that I'm excited to see. Um, but yeah, next week's episode I'm kind of a bit wary of, because I think it might lean a bit too much into the cheesy campness that it's just not for me. Um, we'll see, we'll see. But yeah, that's going to be everything. Next week's ramble is going to be late. I'm away all of next weekend in Cardiff. I'm actually going to be watching next week's episode with some friends, and I won't have recording equipment or anything with me, so I won't be able to do a ramble immediately after I've seen the episode. So it will be a bit later. Um, if it gets to a point where I might as well just wait and do brief thoughts and then just talk about episode 7. I'll just do that. So I'm not guaranteeing a ramble for the next episode. And if I absolutely detest it, I'm not going to want to sit down and talk about it for 40 minutes. That's just not me. Kind of just stay tuned. If it happens, it happens. If not, I will give my brief thoughts on it at the start of my ramble for episode 7. But yeah, that's going to be everything. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Let me know your thoughts below, and I will see you when I see you.